Hey there, and welcome to From the Ground Up Show, where we encourage and inspire the next generation of blue collar leaders by telling the stories of those that have been there, done that, and are usually still doing it. So today we're honored to have Randy Hurtado joining us. Randy has an incredible story. I'm sure you will be as fascinated as I am. Randy is a former fire captain who accidentally entered the roofing industry after having lost a job in the IT space. And over the next few years, he built a small family roofing business into a massive construction conglomerate, now employing 78 people and doing more than $30 million in annual revenue. Andy is a former breakdancer, a father to six, a husband to a wife that he met 35 years ago at the age of 18, and a grandfather to four grandkids. So he really has an awesome story. Randy, thank you for joining us, and we'll dive right in.
One correction there is I met my wife when I was 13.
13. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we like to start out with just a little bit of background. So, Randy, where does Randy come from? How did you grow up? What did that look like? How did you get to where you are today?
Well, I currently reside in Texas. I moved here with my family in 2005. I grew up in California, in Southern California, and it was kind of a rough neighborhood that I grew up in. I grew up between two rival Mexican gangs, Eastside Torrance and T Flats. And so it wasn't abnormal for me to wake up in the middle of the night with the infamous ghetto bird flying over my head, over my house, lighting up the backyard, looking for somebody that they were chasing. And that everything in society tells you that I should have got stuck there, had issues, got into gangs, but it didn't happen because I had an outlet. I learned early on that I actually had rhythm, and so got into breakdancing with friends, and ended up in one of those crews that you see, shown in movies, where we battle other crews, and I was the secret weapon because I was the only white guy, and everybody else, was either Filipino, Hispanic, or black, and so yeah, that was my story for my teenage years. It was how I stayed out of trouble most of the time.
Oh man. So how does that, do you guys battle for money? Is it an organized competition? Do you just meet up in a back alley? What does that look like for somebody that has never seen
organized.
that?
You definitely don't battle for money, but it's more for street cred, because everybody knows who won at the end, and of course then it's then this crew calls that crew out, and it's kind of adolescent, but at the same time, like I said, it was keeping me out of trouble, and there were many a nights where I was at the house practicing, and when I could have been out, doing other things. So yeah, I guess it worked out for me.
That's awesome. Well, it doesn't sound lame or adolescent to me. That sounds awesome. I wish I could have seen something like that. I lack the rhythm to ever do that, but all right. So growing up in Southern California, breakdancing rather than joining a gang, where do you go from there?
Yep. And my childhood was, my mom. I had a single mom for a good chunk of my childhood. She ended up remarrying, when I was 10 or 11, and then I had stepdad in the house. I ended up meeting my wife. A buddy of mine invited me to go to church on Wednesday night as the youth night. Wasn't really brought up in the church up until that point, though my mom would, she'd talk about God every once in a while, but it wasn't really a thing in our house. I think my biggest exposure to church would be I distinctly remember every time an ambulance would drive by, or you could hear an ambulance, and my mom was driving, as long as she was, at a stoplight or a stop sign or whatever, I'd see her drop her head and, do something. One time I asked her, like, Mom, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm just praying for whoever that ambulance is going for. So that was kind of my exposure to Christianity as a kid. And then, in my teenage years, my early teenage years, when I was 13, a buddy of mine that I grew up with around the block, he said, "Man, we're going to church on Wednesday. You want to go with us?" And I'm like, "Church?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah. They play games and they feed you and there's music." And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds like fun." So I went, and that night I looked across the room and I saw this really cute blonde girl, blue eyes, and so I remember the next Wednesday, I'm like, "Hey, are you going to that church thing again?"
Uh,
And he was like, "Yeah, I am. You want to go?" And I was like, "I do." And of course I was not going for the right reasons, but I want to see that girl again. And so I started going regularly and finally mustered up enough courage. There's some other drama that came out of it that, you know, uh, ironically, my now wife, who I've been with since I was 13, originally liked my brother, who was there, and but
oh,
ultimately I got her, and
yeah.
and yeah, we've been
Well,
together since.
congratulations.
Yeah, there you go. So we've been together since I was 13 and she was 11, and yep, my only girlfriend ever, and we still date.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, growing up, Southern California, you met your girlfriend, now wife, at youth group. What does education look like growing up?
Education. Just I graduated with a high school education, high school diploma. Uh, as I mentioned, I was into breakdancing, so it kept me out of a lot of trouble, but I still got into some. And one of those things got me kicked out of high school, traditional high school, and so I had to go to a continuation school. For those of you not familiar with a continuation school, it's basically where they send the riffraff troublemakers to finish school, and that's exactly what I did. And so I graduated from there, and I knew I did not want to go. I did not want to go on to college. I've never been a big fan of school, just because in 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 my education, I always felt that whatever was being taught, I understood it, and so I thought it was silly that I had to go home and do a bunch of homework and take tests. I would generally do really well on the tests, but I'd hate the homework. And so I graduated, but it was like a 3.0, and it was, I immediately went to the workforce, and the workforce brought me among many other jobs from, I worked at Chuck E. Cheese. Yes, I was the character. You do a lot of
Oh,
different jobs when you're, yeah, yeah. And so I worked there. I worked at a place called Play It Again Sports, managed their used sports equipment store. And anyhow, many small jobs led to ultimately my career in IT started. Actually, backing up, I was a loss prevention officer for a sporting goods store. And I remember one day I'm on the cameras and I see this guy come in that I once knew from Chuck E. Cheese. So I went down to the floor and I was like, "Man, what have you been up to?" And he told me he was working at this place called Fry's Electronics, which I don't know if in your area they ever made it out that way before they went out of business, but it was a pretty big chain in the South, or in the West, and it made its way into several other states ultimately after I left. But while I was there, they were only in mainly in California, and I started learning a lot about computers. I started working at Fry's, and one day a gentleman who I had been serving, he'd coming in to buy computer equipment from me for years. He said, "Can I get a business card?" And I handed it to him, and he flipped it over, and he wrote a K on the back. And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "I would like you to come work for me. Name your price." And I was like, "Whoa, this is sudden." And he goes, "No, I've been coming in here now for several years. And every time I come in here, you always do a great job serving me and telling me exactly what I need. And you've always helped me out, and you really know what you're talking about. And I own a software company. and very specifically in the world of security. And I'd really love you to come work for me. I'm like, okay, well, I told him, I wrote,
Wow.
well, I make $48,000 a year here, which, back in, I don't remember what the date was. It was probably 1995 or whatever. That was a pretty good chunk of change for a young guy. And he said, well, I'll pay you that as a base, and I'll pay you commission as well. And so, of course, I'm thinking, well, this is great. So the next day, I took my lunch break to go to his office and kind of almost interview him. I wanted to see what it was all about and what exactly he did and what he was expecting me to do. And yeah, it ended up turning out where he hired me, immediately put me into training. Um, I got all my Microsoft certifications and immediately started working for him, consulting with companies with his network security software. And that sent me down a path of 20 plus some odd years of serving our customers and mitigating their risk in IT. Um, I was always learning throughout the entire process constantly. I would be the guy that everybody lean on in the sales team about, hey, can you explain technically how this works? And because I pride myself in being a very technical salesperson at the time. I wanted to understand why the software worked, not just that it worked and how it worked. And that gave me the ability to be very successful. And I just did that for a long time. We ended up moving the family out to California. Sorry, to Texas in 2005 from California. At this point, we just had our two children, Brittany and Christian, and was working from home. And yeah, I mean, that was the education side. I can go into the professional side of where that all led to. But yeah, was working from home doing
It sounds like
yeah,
that
work.
was a pretty smart guy hiring for talent instead of certification. So,
Yeah, it's funny. I actually carry that into my business today because of that mindset. But I was working from home, and working from home at that time was a little bit different than working from home today. Post COVID, you can have a lot of background noise and kids and everything, but pre-COVID, that was very unprofessional. And so I decided to move my home office
yeah.
to rent an office space. And ironically, I ended up renting the space next to DT Roofing, which is the company that I now own half of. And I was doing my thing, and I would, being an extrovert, I would go out and talk with the uh, the other business owners within the building that I was renting out of, and Derek, my now partner, happened to be one of those. And he and I would go to lunch and talk business. And I really didn't know anything about roofing, but I did understand business, sales, and marketing and what have you. And so I'd give him some pointers, and he'd utilize them. And so finally, I told him, I said, I'm out of ideas, how to help your company. I said, why don't I sell for you on the side, like nights and weekends? And that way I can learn the business a little better, and then maybe I can give you some other advice. And so we started doing that. And then I really started liking it. I really started loving working with homeowners instead of
Hmm.
dealing with corporate America like I was doing with my IT job. And so I started praying about, like, God, if you want me to leave this career and go into a different career, you're going to have to make it abundantly clear, because it became an identity for me. Like, that's all I knew was IT security. And probably about 6 months to a year later, he answered that prayer, because the owner of the company that I worked for as a contractor for 20 some odd years, he called me and said that they had been purchased by private equity, and that they weren't going to be bringing on any contractors. So anybody that was 1099, which is what I ended up being once I moved to Texas. And so uh, there I was without a job, and I needed to make something happen. So the next day I walked into my now partner's office and said, well, how you've been bugging me to come on full time. I start tomorrow. And he was, of course, blown away. He's like, wait, whoa, whoa, hold on. And he goes, how are we going to pay you? And I was like, it'll figure itself out. I said, but I got to run it, because there's a lot of things that need to be done process wise, operation wise, and he said okay, and so we continued to grow the business together, and last year we closed $30 million in revenue on the residential roofing side alone, and we started 4 other companies since then.
Wow. Wow. And I know part of your story, you were a fire captain for a period of time. Where does that fall in? When were you doing that?
So when I moved out to Texas, I didn't know anyone, and my daughter befriended a girl at school who, after about 3 months of going to the school, her friend asked if she can come over and spend the night. Well, I didn't know the girl, and I certainly didn't know her parents, so we said, well, we're going to have to meet their parents, and so the mom came over, and she started telling us about her family, and so what does your husband do? And she said, well, he owns a firefighter training school locally, and he's also on the local volunteer fire department. And of course, I'm coming from California, and not only California, but the big city. I had never heard of a volunteer fire department in my life. I'm thinking like a bunch of good old boys in pickup trucks with buckets of water throwing it onto a house that's on fire. And she said, no, that's full, just the same. You go through the training, you get all the gear, the engines, everything. I was like, no kidding. Well, I'd love to hear more about that. So her husband ended up reaching out to me. At the time, they were actually opening the roster, and he took me through the fire department. And I'll be dang if it wasn't exactly the opposite of what I thought it was. It was very professional. They had engines and various brush trucks and rescue vehicles, and just all the stuff I saw in Los Angeles when I lived there. It was just it was staffed by people who just volunteered their time and went out and got the training that they needed to be able to do it. So I was instantly hooked. I didn't know anyone, so I got
Okay.
45 new friends immediately. I joined the department. I ran every single call I possibly could. I think I broke all the records that first year as a volunteer, as a rookie. I got rookie of the year that I started because I showed up, I think, to everything. And it wasn't too far off of that. I mean, I continued my education in it. I got my introductory firefighter. I got my firefighter two, and started showing signs of leadership. And I was I was voted because in a volunteer department you get voted as officers, you don't get promoted. And so I was voted in to be a lieutenant, and did that for several years, and then ultimately voted to be a captain. And 17 years later, I retired from it. Our businesses were starting to really pick up, and I couldn't devote the time that I had before to it. And I didn't want to hold a spot on the roster. You know, if I'm not showing up to calls, that's not helping the community. And so I decided it was a good time to hang it up. And so spent 17 years as a volunteer firefighter, and I love it. I absolutely loved it. I got my EMT certification while I was doing it. Obviously, went through all the fire school. We're a very aggressive wildland firefighting department, so we were known in our area for being the organization that you call in when you want something done, and it's still like that.
That
Yeah.
sounds pretty exciting. Are there any single calls that really stand out or incidences that you could tell us about?
There's many, honestly. I worked a ton. I mean, so many car accidents. We had a major highway that ran through our community, and so so many accidents where you'd roll up on an accident, you just know that everybody in the accident perished and everybody lived, and that was always a blessing. There were some pretty traumatic ones that I worked, dealing with you know troopers, and or just I can tell you that our department did a really good job with critical incident stress debriefings after major calls like that, so that I didn't, and my colleagues didn't end up with PTSD years later. They did a really good job making sure that we talked about it, and and they stayed connected, because in that world you see some pretty horrific things, and you see it across the spectrum, you things that you would say, why did that drunk driver get to live, but that family all died, and stuff like that. And so, um,
Hmm.
very exciting experience for me, no question. It really fits my personality though, because I am that guy that's an adrenaline junkie. Um, and running into a building that's on fire when everybody else is running out, it was definitely an exciting part of my life that I don't regret doing. It gave me great insight and experience in areas that most never are going to experience in their life. And so, but yeah, definitely. I remember this one brush fire that we had. We got toned out for a grass fire, and it looked like it started at the road and on a major highway. And so we show up on scene and it's burning towards this house. And fortunately, we were able to get ahead of it, run out to the head, put the fire out. And no sooner than we start to get this one under control that we get toned out for another fire about 8 miles up the road. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So I'm smoked out already, but we got this one under control. Let's, Glen Rose, go ahead and show us en route to the next one. So we head out and we're almost to that one, and we get toned out for a third fire. That's only about 5 miles from that one, but they're all in the same trajectory. And so we arrive on the second one. We have a second alarm sounded for the third fire, and a fourth one calls out. And immediately I get on the radio and I say, Glen Rose, you've got a semi truck dragging a chain going down 67. You need to get a trooper out there to stop him. Because it was the only logical thing that could have been happening, that we would have that many fires in a row. Either that or we have, somebody sparking them off, and that just, and that's exactly what it was. About 10 miles down from the fourth fire, they pulled a truck over, and he was dragging a chain and just sparking fires off. And but that was definitely one that always stuck out because you just get fire after fire after fire, and it's going the same way. It's like there's no way it's anything other than that. The craziest fire I've ever worked actually was one that I worked after I retired. I'm still on the reserve list for major calls. And a couple of years ago, I got called out. It might even have made the national news in Texas, Chalk Mountain, as a 7,000-acre fire that burned for 3 days. And my chief called, and when he called me, we're friends, but we're not like doing life together friends. And so when he calls, it's probably going to be something important. So he calls and I pick it up and I say, what are you working? And he goes, a big one. I need you. And I was like, all right, I'm on my way. And so for 3 days I was gone, and that was just a couple of years ago. It was a huge fire. We had Texas Forestry Service flying tankers over the top of us. Yeah, it was just chaos. It looked like a war zone when it was all done.
Oh man. So if you're not fighting fires as frequently anymore, do you have some hobbies or things like that that fuel that adrenaline rush, that need to get out and chase that rush a little bit?
Yeah, I have grandchildren.
Great answer.
But realistically, though, I do have I love road racing. I have a 2009 Nissan GTR that I bought a couple of years back that my wife insisted I buy because she knew that years ago when the GTR was first announced, I've been following that vehicle ever since it came out. I've always loved it,
Yeah.
and so when I had an opportunity to buy a used one, she said, you've earned it. You go get it. And so when I get a chance, I love going out and driving it. There's a track here actually close to our office, and so I plan in the future to into that a little bit more now that I have the vehicle to be able to do it. But
That's awesome.
the growth of our companies has kept me back from being able to go all in on that hobby right now. But that'd probably be the closest to the adrenaline that I'm experiencing today.
That sounds awesome. That is a sweet car. I do not own one, but I would love to. So Well, that sounds like a great segue to dive into more where you are today, running DT Roofing and the subsidiary companies. Tell us a little bit about getting started there after your first day. You get hired, no salary. We're going to have to figure it out. Where do you go from there, and how do you build it into what it is today?
Sure. So out of the gate, and this is a nugget that I like to share with other entrepreneurs that I mentor is, I always say, wear as many hats as you can until you can afford not to. And, in my case, I was selling, I was managing the other sales team members, I was ordering the roofs, I was taking care of the supplemental stuff on the back end of the insurance work. So I'd pretty much my day, Monday through Friday, would look like get up at 5:30, 6 o'clock, work all day, come home, have dinner with the family, put the kids down, spend a little time with my wife. She'd get on the couch and read a book. I'd go to the kitchen table, open up my laptop, and I'd work until 1 o'clock and then rinse and repeat. And I did that for probably about 4 years, 3 years, 4 years, until we got our revenue up to a point where I can afford to hire people to start taking some of the hats off my head. And one of those decisions was getting out of sales personally, which I hated because I do love selling, but I knew that it was necessary for the growth of the company. So I told my partner I was going to get out of sales, and he said, wait a minute, hold on. You're half of our revenue, and you're going to get out of sales after I've given you half my company? And I said, yes, but there's a plan. And I said, ultimately, I'm going to hire more guys and train them to do it the way I did it. So it'll have a force multiplier. And well, he said, okay, I trust you. You haven't let me down yet. And that's exactly what happened. And what's funny is the year I did that, we had just exited the prior year. We did about $7.5 million in revenue at that point. And the year that we did that, we did 10 million in revenue. So the increase was about on par with what the increase was the years prior. But then the year after that, we went from 10 million to 20 million. And so that's when he knew that the decision that we made was the right one. And it's just been uphill from there in regards to, or downhill, however you want to say it, that it was uphill from a trajectory standpoint of success, downhill from it getting a little easier. And then we just continued to grow the roofing side. And it's another lesson that I like to teach some of the company owners that I mentor is that, there's a lot of companies out there that try to do everything under one umbrella. DT roofing, gutters, garage door, construction, fried chicken, and oil change. It's like they're always trying to do everything, but they're not good at anything. And no one's buying that guy's fried chicken, right? And so what I try to encourage other business owners to do is to get really good at one thing and be known for it. And if you do that and you want to dabble in other things or try out other trades, do it as individual companies. That way, one, that it's not just a hobby, that it's actually profitable. So you're doing something that actually makes sense. You're not just melding it into your profit on your P&Ls for your roofing company, and you don't really know that you suck at doing siding or suck at doing construction or whatever the other thing is that you're trying to merge into the roofing side. And of course, roofing is just an example here. Anyone that's listening to this that this resonates with, insert your trade of choice. But what we did was DT roofing got really, really good and big in our area to the point where it was synonymous with quality. It was synonymous with, well, these are our quality, culture, community, integrity. You see it all behind me. These are the things that the building blocks in which we build our companies off of. And so when we decided we wanted to start, for example, a construction company and build homes and do remodeling, what have you, which we got really good at, Kingdom Builder Construction, a DT company, was almost instantly successful. So I didn't have to call it DT Construction. I can give it its own unique identity, but putting a DT company below it gave it instant credibility. And so companies didn't, or
Mm,
customers didn't know the Kingdom Builder Construction, but they knew that DT logo, that logo right there. And so so a lot of people would say, well, if those are the guys that are part of that, I'm going to do business with them because they've done my roof in the past and the experience was wonderful and what have you. So it gave us an opportunity to start a new business, start new services in the area, and be successful at it because we had taken the time and effort to grow the original brand first. And then it just continued, Patriot
yeah.
Garage Door and Service, a DT company, Guardian Seamless Gutters, a DT company. We also separated our residential roofing with our commercial roofing because those are, even though they're both roofing, they're both two entirely different businesses because they deal with two entirely different customer types. The residential customer is going to make more of their decisions based off of emotion because it's their home, it's their castle, right? Where the commercial person's just going to make it based off of, you know, lowest cost possible and, whatever makes the most prudent sense for business. And so the sales cycles are much longer too. So if you can't have the same guys trying to sell both, it's chaotic. Plus the margins on them, the profit margins aren't the same either. And so we separated the two companies, and that's actually one of the best decisions we've made in the roofing side because now we have distinct leadership in each one of the companies, distinct sales folks, service tradesmen that are out there doing their craft in their specialty, and our customers are being served well because of it. And so all of the companies have been successful in their own right. Guardian Seamless Gutters is a brand new company, and it's on track to do $1 million its first year. Our garage door company
Wow.
will do $3 million in revenue. And that's not terrible and you consider a garage door company generally sells garage doors $1,200 at a time. And so the philosophies and the mindset, the way that we ran DT roofing and built it, all that was used as the building blocks to build each one of these other companies. So we didn't have to start all over and kind of figure things out. We already knew what we needed to do, and that's why they were successful out of the gate. When you try to do it all under one umbrella, it's very difficult to do it that way.
Yeah. So when does Fantastic Fried Chicken, a DT company, come online?
There's not going to be a fantastic fried chicken. I can promise you that. I'm not good at fried chicken or oil changes, but that oftentimes I use that as an extreme example because that sometimes you wonder, like, what were they thinking, and so,
Yeah.
that's kind of where we're at in that realm. We'll leave the fried chicken to Colonel Sanders and the oil changes to, Jiffy Lube, and we'll go ahead and fix both of their roofs, but
Sounds
so
good.
yeah, that's my advice to those out there that are trying to be everything to everyone.
Sounds like you guys have had a pretty meteoric rise with DT roofing and all your subsidy companies. How do you manage growth like that in a sustainable way? What does that look like?
Well, it looks like finding good leaders. If you try to do everything yourself as an owner, you're going to burn out, zero question. It's a lot cheaper to do it that way. I mean, if you're not hiring a bunch of leaders, you don't have a bunch of salaries that you're paying, but then you're going to burn out. And that's the path that I was headed down. My partner would have been headed down the same path had we not decided that if we're going to do this, we need to have management in place for each one of the companies and that we're focused specifically on those companies. And so once a month, we have a leadership meeting in the same room that I'm in right now, and all the leaders from the companies, our CFO, our CMO, they all get together and we talk about that month's successes and any issues that came up and things that need to be voted on. And we choose the employee of the month. And so we get together as a team every single month and talk about that collective stuff. But each company in its own right is run as its own entity every month. And so what's great about it too is they feed off of each other too. DT roofing, oftentimes when you're replacing a roof, the garage door got hit by hail as well, and so you need a garage door. So they get a bid from Patriot. They don't get special pricing or anything. It's same price they would give another roofing company or a customer, and same with Guardian seamless gutters. But what it does is it allows us to then sell those services to other people that would be traditionally our competition. I have other roofers in the area that buy their garage doors from me. I have other roofers that are begging for us to get our gutter division bigger so they can use our gutter company. Right now, our gutter company can only keep up with our roofing company. And so, yeah, there's a lot of wisdom there in regards to, you can not only run them as separate businesses, but kind of cross-pollinate between them, and I'll still allow the outside world to use them as individual services and kind of almost predict your success.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Can you help
kin
us
to like an ice
understand the
cream.
timeline?
I was just going to say it's kin to an ice cream company that has their ice cream packaging and what have you, but they also own the sugar cane farm and they also own the packaging company. It's like, all of those companies are going to be successful because the main product is successful. And so there's no reason, if you're able to do it, there's no reason to go out and pay somebody else to do those individual things if you're able to do it yourself.
Yeah. Can you give us some insight into the timeline of when you came on board at DT Roofing and how your sales grew, and then when you launched all of these subsequent companies?
Yeah. So in 16, the company was company opened in 2009. In 16, the company was a $1.8 million a year roofing company. And that was the highest that we were able to achieve up until that point in a year. And, through the grace of God and talents, once Derek gave me control of the operational side, our first year we did 3.7. The next year we did 5.8, then we did 7.5, then we did 10 million, then 20 million. And it just continued to grow. Every year there was growth. As we started to plateau, the growth wasn't as obvious. It's not going from 10 million to 20 million, but it was 20 million, then 22 million, then 24 million, then 30 million, and so it continued to grow, but it's spattered in between there is when we started to say, hey, maybe we should try some construction work and see if we're good at that. And that was around 19 is when we just decided to start a construction company. The same year is when we also decided to start a garage door company. All of these companies, by the way, were created out of one reason, and that, or for one of two reasons. We felt that the service was either underserved or poorly served in our area. There was no reason for us to go out and start a HVAC company or a plumbing company or electric company, none of the MEPS services, because those were all represented very well in our area and still are today. So it wouldn't have made good financial sense to go out and compete in a market that's already highly competitive in an area that we knew nothing about. So if we were going to get into something that we knew nothing about, it should probably be something that is already either underserved or poorly served. So we'd have a lot of grace thrown at us if we didn't do well right out of the gate. And that's exactly what happened. And so anything that we're willing to get into, we want to do well and we want to win most of the time. And, fortunately this year, several years before, each one of our companies has won the best of category. Our community, where our headquarters is, has a best of Hood County every year for each category: roofing, garage door, overhead doors, gutters, construction. And fortunately, our companies have won their categories every year for the last several years. And so that's kind of a measuring stick for us as to whether we're doing what we say we're going to do. It's not just a derivative of the revenue numbers, but rather what the community says about us, because it's the community that votes on those things. Yeah.
So in the last 9-10 years that you've kind of been running operations, are there any moments that really stand out as high moments or low moments?
Any time that I have to let somebody go And fortunately, that's not very often. We don't have a revolving door at any of our companies, but anytime we have to let somebody go, it's definitely a low moment. We're definitely we do understand that this person's attached to a family and people that rely on them, but we also have to be cognitive of the fact that there's 78 other employees that are relying on us making good decisions in order for the companies to continue to succeed. And so if a person's let go from our company, we've considered every possible idea on how we can make them work somewhere in the company. And we've concluded there just isn't a place. And we don't really look at it, or at least I don't look at it as firing them. I look at it as I'm going to allow them to go do something that they're passionate about, because it's clearly not this. If it came to the point where we're letting them go, then they're not passionate about what they're doing, and we need somebody that's going to be passionate about what they're doing. And so, the funny thing is not, about a year and a half ago, I had one of those gentlemen. He happens to go to my church, walk up to me. He's working security, and he said, "Hey, you have a second?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely. What's going on?" He said, "Hey, I just wanted to thank you." And I said, "Thank me? Thank you for what?" He said, "Because you let me go, I found out that my passion is to be a paramedic, and I'm in paramedic school." And I was like, "Man, that is awesome. Praise God." And today he is a paid paramedic, saving lives and helping patients in his area. And so, you know, identifying that he just wasn't passionate about what he was doing and letting him go allowed him to go and search for something he was passionate about. And so it worked out well for him. And the high, anytime I see any of my staff um, able to accomplish something in their life personally that they would otherwise not have been able to in the past, it's a big high for me. One of our salespeople is a former teacher, and we all know, no matter where you are in America, teachers get paid crap for what they do. And so the fact that he was able to buy a home on 5 acres and just provide for his family after all those years of being, paid terribly and being an amazing teacher. My son actually, he was one of my son's teachers. It was really gratifying to see that he was able to do that. When one of the guys is able to, just anything, any accomplishment they're able to meet, that brings me great joy. And I think it's derived from the fact that I grew up not exactly, we were impoverished, and so not having a whole lot growing up, seeing people, knowing that my colleagues, people that work with us, that they're able to provide for their kids, so their kids are never going to question, what's for dinner, or if they're going to be able to do some basic things. So I think that's huge for me.
That's great. I'm finding that's a trend with a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of leaders. Their high moment, their most proud moment is not when they made a lot of money, but it's when the people working under them achieved something and really succeeded and made something of themselves. That's pretty exciting to be a part of somebody's story in that way.
Yes.
And I know you guys have a really cool program you call DT Serves. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So DT Serves is a two-part program. The first part, once a quarter, we find somebody in our service base that is in need of something. Most recently it was an elderly lady whose back patio completely collapsed off of the back of her house. And it was just poorly constructed from the beginning. They didn't tie it into the actual frame, roofing of the house. It was just attached to the fascia, and so it failed. And fortunately, nobody was hurt because it happened while our guys were doing her roof. And she had actually told them, like, "Look, I'm not sure if that's sturdy or not." And our guys had just walked under it, and it just came off, and I'm sure it had something to do with when they were removing the shingles that came up to that portion of the patio, because we hadn't roofed that area yet. But she said, "Hey, don't. I'm so glad nobody was hurt. Don't worry about it. It was going to fail anyways. We always knew it was. I don't even go back here, whatever." Um, so I got back to my VP of sales, and he said, "Man, why don't we do a DT serves and build this lady a new patio, a porch area?" And so we did, and we cut back the roofing, got into the decking to the trusses, and went ahead and tied it in so it was nice and strong. And all 17 of our sales guys took time out of the field where they're making money because they're commission only, and we served her for 2.5 days and built her a new patio. And she was so gracious, grateful rather, and it was just great to be able to serve her and just see the smile on her face when she walked out and just saw the construction. We made it a lot sturdier than the old one, and so it should outlast her quite a bit, and so she was definitely blessed by that. And then the other part of DT serves that our marketing, our CMO came up with is when we do a roof in a neighborhood, we have these bags that have DT serves on them, and it's partially obviously to grow our business, but also to help serve locally. We didn't it's not an original idea. We got the idea from the Boy Scouts. The Boy Scouts will go out and they'll put a paper bag at the house and say, if you have any canned goods that you'd like to donate, just put them inside the bag and we'll come by and collect them later. And so we go into neighborhoods where we're doing roofs, and the DT serves bags will be left at the houses. We'll let them know, look, we're going to come back by. If you don't have anything or you don't want to participate, don't worry about it. Just leave the bag here and we'll pick it up. And then we bring the food back to the office. And for every can or box of food that is donated, we match. And then we give it to the local pantry
Wow.
in that county. Because it's become a huge issue in our area that pantries are just empty. And there are a lot of families that could use the food. So it's an opportunity for us to both serve them and also grow our business by getting in front of our customers. And of course, naturally, customers are going to love that. They love the fact that that we're helping feed people. And so it's just it's a concept that I got. I was at a conference back at Win the Storm this year. Actually, Charlie Kirk was the keynote for it. I got to speak with him 3 weeks before his passing, and there was a gentleman
Oh,
there that talked about you could have nonprofit businesses and you can have for-profit businesses. He said, but what if you had a for-purpose business? And he went on to tell how he's made millions and millions of dollars, but he's always had a for-purpose business where that purpose was for everything, every this that we do, then we'll do that. It's not just donating to an organization, but tangible, something that, for every, and I'll give an example, where every 20 roofs that we put on, we'll dig a water well in Africa or something. And it's a for-purpose business. And so I came back with that and, approached my our CMO, our chief marketing officer, and I said, hey, I told her the whole concept. And I said, I want to be a for-purpose business. And so the canned food portion is what she came up with. And it was in direct response to the crisis of the pantries in our area and all the counties that we serve. So,
wow. That's pretty cool. That's a great idea and
that's
a
what
really
DT
unique
serves is.
idea. I've not heard of that before. Well, that is something pretty unique about your business. Are there some other things unique about you as a leader or unique about your business that you think have contributed to your success?
We wake up every morning with a willingness to serve. I think if any company who has a service-based business just remembers the industry you're in is called service. And if you just, no matter what your trade is, if you wake up and your goal is to serve your fellow man in any capacity, but of course, obviously in your trade, you're going to be successful. I mean, it's just a reality. And in fact, I would even argue that it's easier to be successful in today's age than it was in our grandparents' age, because in our grandparents' age, it wasn't uncommon for people to just serve for the sake of it, right? It was more wholesome. It was more, neighborly. These days, people are, when the world went flat, everybody's so focused on their phone that they don't focus on the people around them. And so our whole mindset in our company is relationships, going out and building relationships, not only with our client base, but with other professions that need our services in order for them to be successful. Real estate agents, insurance agents, property managers. And when you do that well, a huge part of your revenue every year comes from these people as well. On average, between a third and a quarter of our revenue every year comes from those three titles. And it's because they know who to call, because we're not focused on just getting business from them. We're focused on solving a problem that they have. And because of that, they're willing to send all their business our way. So I think that's something that's unique about our company, is our approach is not just the traditional marketing. I only spend 1.5% of my revenue in marketing. Every book I've ever read on business says you're supposed to spend between 6 and 7% of your revenue on marketing. So the reason why we don't have to is because we spend so much time being human beings that naturally turns into revenue dollars because customers want to do business with us.
That's a great way to approach it. We have a similar philosophy in our business, and I think it served us well. So,
yes.
Have you made any mistakes in the last few years that you think significantly delayed your growth or your trajectory?
I would say that we've made decisions that on the outset did, but on the onset we felt was a good decision. For example, I've mentioned that we've started several companies. Well, one of the companies that we started years ago was a power wash and soft wash company. If you're not familiar with soft wash, everybody knows what power washing is, but soft washing is when you use a chemical to clean something. It means the surface can't be hit with power, otherwise you'll damage it. So soft washing uses a bleach-like material that cleans the surface, and there was a huge need for that in our area. We noticed a lot of roofs that were not damaged, but just ugly because they had algae growing on them. And algae naturally, it's called Gliocapsa but it naturally feeds on the limestone in the shingle. And so it breaks your roof down. So we thought, well, if we can't replace the roof, we'll clean it and make some money off of that as well. Well, that worked. It worked really well, actually, and it brought in, on average, between $350,000 a year in revenue, which isn't terrible, at 60 to 70% margins. Not terrible, except when you consider that all the time that we were spending doing that, we could have been focusing even more on our $30 million roofing company. And so sometimes, we didn't have a good experience finding good leadership to just take that over. Otherwise, it would have just been another business in the DT family. But when we definitely had somebody that would go out and do the jobs. But as far as having a leader that would step back, that wasn't in the field but could step back and grow the company and come up with ideas, that we just didn't have that anybody to step forward to do that. So it relied a lot on me to do that.
Yeah.
And it just didn't make sense. For my time was more valuable growing our other businesses than it was to grow that. And so what we did is we found a local window washing company that actually wanted to get into power washing and soft washing. And we said, well, how about we just sell you all of our equipment? And anytime our customers call to say, hey, can you come out and do this? Because they knew that we did that in the past. We'll just let them know we no longer do it ourselves, but this is the company we've partnered with, and this is who you should use. And they use that business that they get from us to help pay off all that equipment that they bought from us that was very expensive when we bought it. And so that's worked out because customers are still served in that space, but it's just not our company anymore. It's theirs. And so that would probably be one. I wouldn't say it was a regret, because it was a good experience. It gave me the experience of knowing that if I start a company without leadership out of the gate, then it's probably not going to be successful, because I don't have the time to be the leader of that sole company when I'm trying to run five other, up to 40 million in revenue companies. My time was more valuable being the operations of the other companies. And so, and it's what we learned. So now, even since then, when we've thought about maybe we should start that, like, nope, we don't have a leader for it. So we haven't started it, and, so that's kind of where we're at with that. So it was a good lesson learned, in that respect, but that would probably be a point where we, did something that didn't work out entirely.
It sounds like that might be what I call a beneficial mistake. You learn a big lesson by
Yeah.
making a mistake that helps you grow or prevents you from making a bigger mistake later.
One of the things I tell the business owners that I mentor all the time is, if you ever are going through something, give me a shout, because I probably paid the dumb tax already, and I'll give you advice on what to do or what not to do in that particular realm. That's one of the, I heard somebody say one time, and it's absolutely so true. It's, if you're in business and you're not failing, you're not growing. Because you have to try some things. Some things, there just isn't a precedence. You don't have somebody to go and check. Have you done this before? It's like, no. Sometimes you're doing things that are unique, and so you just got to try it to see if it works. It's actually a perfect segue into my most recent venture that I told you about. With the Good Contractors list. The Good Contractors list, I came on 2 months ago as their chief operations officer to help grow this company nationwide. It was a company that was founded by John Hill in 2011 in the DFW market, and the sole purpose of it was to help homeowners find good contractors so they'd stop getting screwed by bad contractors, because that was a rampant issue. It's actually a problem all over the nation. And he did a great job growing that solution in the DFW market. In fact, since 2011, they've backed over $5 billion worth of jobs in just DFW. And so how the Good Contractors list works is, if you're a contractor that meets the requirements of the company, for a small fee every month, we back every single job that you do with a $25,000 guarantee from the Good Contractors list. So it builds instant credibility to that contractor and sets them apart from anybody else that they might be competing with. And the way that segued into that is, as I said, sometimes you got to do something that nobody else is doing. When John Hill first came to his family and friends and said, "Hear me out. I'm going to guarantee every contractor that gets on the list with, at the time, it was a $10,000 guarantee on every job they do, and they're only going to pay me $250 a month for it. What do you think?" Everybody was like, "You're nuts. You're going to guarantee somebody else's work and to that dollar amount, and you're only going to charge $250 a month." And 14 years later, it's going nationwide. I came on as a COO. My company has been on the Good Contractors list since 2019, end of 19, beginning of 20. Since, two other of my companies have joined the list, and it helps close business for Good Contractors. It helps you go in and present to the customer and be different than the rest, because you essentially pose zero risk at all to your customer. Because if DT Roofing doesn't do exactly what they said they're going to do on the contract, the Good Contractors list will come in and make it right up to $25,000. That's a big deal for homeowners, because it removes the risk of choosing this contractor. And so it just tells a better story than the rest. And the good news is that out of that $5 billion that we have backed over the last 14 years, the percentage of claims that we've had because a good contractor ended up turning into a bad contractor and not doing what they're supposed to do is so infinitesimal. It's so minute that it's a calculating error. And that just tells us that we're doing the right thing. And so that's my most recent venture, is because I have such amazing leadership here in this company, and I don't have to be in the day to day, like, babysit, micromanage. They're doing an amazing job. It allows me to focus on growing the good contractors list nationwide, where it was once just a DFW based company. The last 2 months that I came on, we've been able to grow the company into 15 new states.
Wow. Wow. That's some pretty incredible growth. You guys are going to be nationwide any minute now.
That's the goal. Our goal is within the next 3 to 5 years that every home in America, especially in the major markets, where it can propagate a lot faster, that every home has the good contractors list on their lips. When they're thinking about hiring a contractor, they're going to go to the goodcontractorslist.com and put in the trade that they need, put in their zip code, and find a bunch of companies that have already been vetted by our company, and that we're willing to back with a $25,000 guarantee on every job. And that way homeowners don't have to go to Google anymore and play contractor roulette. It's no longer about what they say about themselves. It's about what we say about them, and we're willing to put our money where our mouth is.
That says something. Is there anything that has happened in your leadership journey building DT roofing that has caused you to really shift an opinion about something that you felt strongly about before and have opened your eyes to seeing it from a new perspective and have changed your mind?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is something that's probably pretty specific to our industry, especially in the storm markets. And that is, I used to think that if insurance companies stopped insuring roofs, which 10 years ago you said that and people would laugh and say insurance companies are never going to stop insuring roofs, but it's a real serious consideration now among insurance companies. But if they stopped insuring roofs, or if they created really, really high deductibles to the point where homeowners that would affect our business negatively. I've shifted that mindset into realizing that no, it's actually the companies that do it right that are going to be around when that happens. Because at the end of the day, if hail falls out of the sky and damages the roof doesn't know that the insurance company is going to charge 4% deductible. It just knows that it's damaged, and somebody's got to fix that roof. And so in an environment where the customer has $1,000 deductible or a 1% deductible, or it's a small fee, to get the whole roof replaced, they'll tend to go with pretty much any guy that comes, with a fancy truck and a slick tongue at their door. They'll sign a contract to replace the roof. But when they have to come out of their pocket with either more of it through a high deductible or all of it through having to finance to get a new roof, they're going to be a lot pickier about the company that they choose. They're going to want the company that actually takes their business seriously. Because when you give somebody a 5 or 10-year warranty on something, it kind of implies you expect to be in business for 5 to 10 more years. And so they're going to be more specific about who they choose. And so my vision, or my goal, is to just continue to grow a company that everyone will want to use when the proverbial crap hits the fan on the insurance market and they stop either covering them all together or making it so painful that the homeowner's having to come out of pocket a majority of the roof. So my advice to the roofing companies out there would be that company. Be that company that everybody's going to want to use when they have to come out of their pocket more. The other thing you need to really know how to do is offer financing. Because if you just stay old school and expect the homeowner to come out of pocket, the average homeowner has $2,500 in their savings account. So financing is inevitable. And so you have to make sure that you partner with a good financing company to offer financing now instead of waiting for when it's a necessity, because then you're going to be left behind.
Yeah. Well, I know you read a lot. You clearly put a lot of thought and interest into growing. What are some of the best resources you have used to grow as a leader?
Hmm, great question. So there's a great book in the roofing industry by a friend of mine. Now I consider him a friend. At the time, I didn't know him from Adam. His name is Martin Pettigrew. He wrote a book called The Roofing Machine, and it's a great book that every roofing company owner should read. I don't necessarily agree with everything in the book now that I've been in the industry and have been a leader in the industry, but 95% of what he says in there I agree with 100%. Obviously, Atomic Habits, everybody should read Atomic Habits. It's an absolutely great book for habit forming, keeping you on pace and task. I also study apologetics, which, for those of you that are not familiar with Christianity, apologetics is the study of things that make up our Christian faith, more evidentiary type stuff. And um, I've been studying apologetics now for probably 8 to 10 years. And my favorite book is by a gentleman by the name of Mark Clark called The Problem of God. And the reason why I like it is because he came from being an atheist to very similar to Lee Strobel or some of the other guys out there, J. Warner Wallace, that were all atheists, but ultimately came to professing the name of Christ because of evidence that they came across and have since, now they would say they have faith, but it took some evidence for them to get there in their minds. And The Problem of God is an excellent book. I've probably read it 3 or 4 times. Um, and truth be told, I'm not a big reader. If I do read a book, I listen to
Okay.
it. I have a lot of windshield time in my truck, and
Yeah.
so I'll listen to books, audiobooks, and I'll listen to them on speed 1.25. And my wife thinks it's so funny when she hears me reading a book and I blah, 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 blah. And it's like I can hear what he's saying and everything. I just don't want to wait for his draw that's a little bit longer than I want to listen to. And so yeah, most of the books that I read are
I do the same
quick.
thing.
I get through them pretty quickly, and it allows me to consume more of them. But that said, I don't like to read a whole lot of books. I love documentaries. Um, and as I said in the onset, when I'm on the education portion, I definitely love to learn. I'm just more of a hands-on learner. Like, I didn't know anything about business, so I got into business, and now I'm teaching other people business. It's because I'm learning it hands-on. I'm not, it's not some MBA that wrote a book, and on it, maybe never even had a business. He learned something in school, and so he wrote a book about it. In fact, sometimes I'll read something, I'll go, "This guy clearly has never been in business because that does not work. That philosophy is dead." Um, so yeah, I would say those are a couple of books that I've read that I really enjoy that I think are relevant to my life and
Okay.
things that I care about.
Yeah. I know you had mentioned that someday you might like to write a book. Uh, if you
Hmm.
do, what would be the title and what direction would you take it?
Oh gosh. Hmm. I don't, I couldn't even. It, it's just funny because sometimes when I'm telling these stories, because I've done several podcasts, and I don't normally do these long form podcasts, so as much as we've talked about today, normally doesn't make it into most of them. It's like a segment of them, but when you hear things like, "I was a kid that grew up in the barrio between two, Mexican gangs that were fighting, that had the police lighting up my house, that was a break dancer, that got arrested at 16 for shooting a kid in the butt with a BB gun. Come on, California. Um, that graduated from continuation school. By the way, I would love to go back to my continuation school. I told my wife this the other day and ask the principal to give me like 30 minutes in front of all the students that are currently there and just say, "I just want to encourage you guys that I was one of you and tell my story," because a lot of those, if someone would have come into the room when I was there and shared the story that I have now, I probably would have been a lot more encouraged than I was at that time. Ultimately, things worked out, but I would love to do that.
Yeah.
But if you hear the story, been with his wife since he was 13, had his first child at 16, was Chuck E. Cheese for 2 years, firefighter for 17 years, IT security guy for 24 years, uh, five time serial entrepreneur, and on my way to growing a sixth company to 100 million plus. It doesn't even make sense. It sounds fictional, to be honest with you. And if I
Yeah.
wasn't living the life, I wouldn't believe it myself. It sounds like just a bunch of, made up stuff, but it's the God honest truth. And so I don't know what I would write. I know that it would be full of plenty of color and stories, and I'd probably get people to snicker a few times. But if anything, it would be if my ultimate goal would be when someone put the book down, they would say, "I'm really inspired." Yep.
You have a really unique view or approach to collaboration with other businesses in your
Yes.
area and even some of your
Hmm.
competitors. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that unique approach has benefited your business?
Yeah, so and I alluded to it a little bit early on, but when I go out and I talk to other roofing company owners, whether they're right in my backyard or within my service area, or sometimes, like next week, I have one flying in from, is it Iowa or Idaho? Um, but he's flying in just to spend 3 days, just to see our operations, pick my brain. He's at where we were about 4 years ago. He's doing about 17 to 20 million, and so he's coming out, and I love seeing people win. I don't look at somebody down the road that does the same thing I do as a competitor. And I know by the traditional use of the term, he is a competitor. But I look at competition as something that takes, and it's maybe a unique approach. Now, as I'm saying the words, I realize that it probably sounds different, but I look at a competitor as somebody who takes money out of my pocket unjustly. Meaning, if it was a roofer that covered a deductible illegally, or um, cut corners on the project illegally, or not illegally, but just cut corners and didn't do the customer right, um, or something to that nature. That's what I consider competition. Is something I can't truly compete with because I'm not going to break the law. I'm not going to shortcut the customer for the sake of winning the bid and trying to race to the bottom on the price. So I look at guys that run their businesses with integrity as a collaboration, as a collaborator. Somebody who's, hey man, sometimes you're going to win, sometimes I'm going to win, but at the end of the day, our industry is lifted up because of that. That's my mindset. Those at the top collaborate, those
Mm.
at the bottom compete. Obviously, I didn't come up with that mindset, but I'm just saying it's what I live by. And so I've had people literally say, like, "Man, what's your angle? Why are you helping me, or why would you help them?" And that's my mindset. Is look, one, and I look them right in their eyes right in their eyes when I say it. It's like, you're never going to outwork me. So and the other thing is probably only 5 to 10% of the people that I share any of this with is going to do anything with them. So if you're one of those 5 to 10%, more power to you. If you win the job over me, awesome. That customer's getting taken care of. Because here's the truth. I only did 1,500 roofs last year. In the roofing world, most roofing companies would drool at that figure. But I did 1,500 roofs last year. And there's over 350,000 people in the area that I serve. I can't serve them all. So if I can do my part to help make other competitors, what people would say competitors, but I would say collaborators, a little more successful at what they're doing so that they can help those people I'm not going to be able to get to, then why not? And you know what? Along my journey over the last 10 years, there's been somebody that I've gone to that I've said, "Hey, I have a question." And they didn't say, "Hold on, hold on, hold on. Swipe your credit card right here and then I'll give you some wisdom." No, they just shared their wisdom with me, and it helped me to grow my business. So why would I not do the same? And Yeah, so hopefully that answered that question. I know what was the second part of that? Because I know there was two parts.
I think you hit it. What was your approach to
Okay.
collaboration, and how has it helped grow your business? So,
Well, the other the two parts were in my head. The second part is when, and I alluded to it earlier, is when you treat people like that, they tend to want to do business with you as long as it doesn't compete with them. So, for example, those same roofers will buy their garage doors from my garage door company because they know the type of person I am. And they're like, I
mm,
like Randy. I want to bless him with business. And as long as he's not sending his roofing company with gutters, garage doors, and construction on the side of the truck to my customer's house to do something, then I'll do business with him. And so that's why having separate companies is a better approach too, especially when you want to collaborate with people in your industry, because then I can send Guardian Seamless Gutters vans to their house, do the gutters on the house, and they never saw a DT roofing anything, and so they're willing to do business with me. So it helps in both ways.
well, I know my favorite question, you've alluded to it a little bit. I know you're a person of faith, a Jesus follower. How has that affected your leadership and affected your entrepreneurial journey?
I would say it's affected it greatly just because, well, if you look at Matthew 25, the parable of the talents, in that parable, the one that multiplied his talents was the one that was given glory, not the one that buried it. And so I think it's really important when God gives you an opportunity to be successful at something that you use the talents that he's given you to do it. And so that's where I'm at. I don't apologize for working hard and trying to be successful because the Bible also says that when you do anything, do it as if you're doing it for the Lord. And so if I'm running a business, why would I not want to do well doing it if it's as if I was doing it for the Lord? And so, I think a lot of people out there apologize for success, and I don't at all. It's the love of money, not the it's that was the root of all evil, not money itself. And so if I look at money as a resource to do kingdom work, then I want it all. Look, I mean, I'm not going to be shy about
Yeah.
saying that. I want to make a lot of money because I want to do a lot of good in this world with it. It's a tool. So, there was a time I remember in a meeting where I remember trying to drive this point across with my sales team. I said, who here wants to make a lot of money this year? And knowing my character, nobody wanted to raise their hand because they thought it was a trap. And I said, why is not every hand in the air? And they were like, oh, well, and it was just, and I said, the more you make, the more you give, the more you can give. And so, you should want to just kill it out there. It's okay to make money. It's just don't make it your God. And so that's kind of, my position on that is work hard. And, but I will share with those of you that are watching this that don't know the Lord, I'll share with you what I like to say. It's the biggest but in the Bible, and that tends to get people's attention. It's Romans 6:23. It says, for the wages of sin is death, but the free gift of eternal life is from the Lord through Christ Jesus. And if that first sentence stopped at the wages of sin is death, period, then we'd all be doomed. But because it says, for the wages of sin is death, comma, and it follows it with the biggest but in the Bible, but the free gift of eternal life from the Lord is through Christ Jesus, we all have an opportunity to accept that free gift. But when we don't accept that free gift, we've earned that wage at the beginning of that verse, and that wage is death.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. And I know you had mentioned you even host a weekly Bible study in your office that you have open to all
Mm-hmm.
employees and other business owners, even your competitors.
Yep.
What does that look
Mm-hmm.
like? How many people show up? How does that go?
So it varies. Actually, I'm part of two Bible studies every week. One's in the industry. It's called Contractor Fellowship, and it's a bunch of roofers that get together nationwide on Wednesday mornings. And we right now we're reading out of the book of Proverbs. And those contractors are from all walks in their faith, like from brand new believers to people that have been walking with the Lord for 30 years. And then on Wednesday or on Thursday mornings at our office, we host a Bible study. It's not a requirement to come, but we offer it to any of our staff. And we also invite any contractor in the area, regardless of trade, to come on out, and whether you're a competitor or not, to come out and just study the Word with us. And today we had 9 or 10 guys that showed up. About 4 of them were not from our company. Sometimes 15, 20 show up. Sometimes 5 or 6 show up. It just depends. But it's a standing. It's a standing open. Sometimes I can't make it. Maybe I'm out of town or what have you. I wasn't in town last Thursday for it because I was in Utah meeting with a partner for the Good Contractors list. But we have it there, and it's hosted by a friend of mine who's a pastor at a local church, and he comes and leads it, and he does it for free, but we do give him a gift every 10 weeks. We give him a gift, so I just tell him to remind me when we've hit 10 weeks, and it's more of just a blessing for thanking him for taking his time. But he comes every single week, regardless of who shows up. So there's always that one steady person that's going to be there. And it's worked out really well. I think it's really important. I've had people say, "Are you concerned that somebody's going to complain about it?" Or like, go ahead and complain. It's my company, it's my building, and it's not a requirement, so I'm not breaking any laws. I'm opening it to anyone and everyone, and I don't even tell people that if you're not a Christian, don't show up. I want people that are non-Christians to show up. I want them to hear the truth.
Yeah.
And so, that's what we do. We started doing this now. This is our, at the end of this year, it'll be our second full year of doing it. At the beginning of 24, as kind of a New Year's resolution, I felt like the Lord was prompting me to start a Bible study at the office. And so I was obedient and did it. And it's been great.
That's
We've
awesome.
read through several books, and we talk about it every week. And there's great conversations that happen. Sometimes the conversations are really deep, and sometimes we're laughing, and so it's great fellowship, and it's what it's all about.
That's great. That's really cool to hear. I know you talked a little bit about working hard. You said you challenge any of your competitors to outwork you. Working hard unto the Lord instead of unto men. What does a day of work look like for you? What does your schedule look like?
It depends. It seems like every day, especially since taking on the job with the Good Contractors list as a new, because sometimes it'll be heavier Good Contractors list stuff that day. Other days it'll be heavier DT or Kingdom Builder stuff. Lately, it's been a lot more of the Good Contractors stuff. It's been my focus. I wake up around 5:45, 6 o'clock. Sometimes I'll sleep into the ripe old age of 6:30, and then I get up, and I'll often, while I'm brushing my teeth, what have you, I'll put these headphones on and I'll turn my phone on and listen to. There's certain YouTube channels that I'll listen to, and one that pops up all the time is I'm just drawing a blank right now, but he's a former pastor who started a YouTube channel to just share wisdom with people, and word of wisdom, I think. But it's just great. So I'll listen to about 30 minutes, and while I'm getting ready, and then jump in the truck. And on the way into the office, which takes about 45 minutes to get there, I'm probably listening to something else, another podcast or another YouTube video that I'm just listening to, and I get into the office and the day begins. And sometimes it's a whole day of meetings. Today, my day was Bible study, followed immediately by a 2-hour mastermind class that I was co-hosting to pour into about 25 other roofing company owners that are part of that mastermind. A good buddy of mine, Randy Brothers, He runs the Roofing Academy, and he asked me to come in and guest speak today. So I just spent 2 hours just pouring into these guys, answering questions. Um, Several of them are, just starting out. Some of them have been in it for 5 or 10 years, and one of the guys has been doing it since 1991. I was like, dude, I need to ask you some questions. What are we talking about over here? But yeah, and then went from that to lunch to right into this meeting. So today is going to be is a long day of these podcast type, but I am a guest on a lot of podcasts in the roofing industry, talking about various topics. Um, I attend a lot of conferences, and I speak at conferences a lot, whether I'm on a panel or I'm up on stage, or just as a yesterday I was at one where they just wanted me to kind of, if they had a Q&A section, and if somebody asked a question that they were kind of stumped on, they were like, hey, can you and Jason's my buddy that's in Florida, owns a $60 million roofing company, and like, can you and Jason just sit over here, and if somebody asks a question, you guys can kind of field the questions and stuff. So but I do enjoy pouring into people and helping where I can. And I'm blessed to get responses from people all the time. Like, man, I just watched that podcast you did or whatever, and man, I am so inspired and all that. And it makes me feel really good that I can impact people.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. I'm sure you'll be inspiring to our listeners, and you're an inspiration to me. I've really enjoyed hearing your story. So, as we wrap up and get to the end of our time, do you have anybody that you'd like to see on the show? Somebody that has a cool story you'd like to hear more about, where they came from, how they got into whatever industry they're in, or maybe somebody that's in a really unique industry that our listeners might want to learn a little bit about?
Well, my good buddy, mentor in both business and a brother in Christ is Dominic Frazier of Frazier Roofing. He's out of Georgia, and he's about 20% larger than we are in as a company size, but just overall a great guy. Um, Ryan Groff with Sales Transformation Group. He owns a company that trains companies from all trade types on how to sell properly. He's another brother in Christ, but he really has a great story. He was a former professional baseball player who ended up getting into the industry he's in now. And he's really a good guy. Lives in Hawaii part-time, also lives in Texas, has a huge family. Just overall solid dude.
Awesome. Well, I might have to have you
couple off the
connect us
top.
if
I
you're
have
willing to
plenty
do
of,
that.
yeah, not a problem. I'd be glad to.
Well, my last question, a segment we do every show to fuel the debate or maybe settle it once and for all. If you have a job to do and you got to pick up a cordless tool, what color are you grabbing?
Red.
Red. Milwaukee, huh?
Oh, everything I have is Milwaukee, from my impacts to my drills to even my lawnmower. I have an electric lawnmower that uses those big monster 12.0 high capacity batteries that cost, a mint and an arm. And I just use that for just because we have a ranch, so I just use that for our lawn on our house, and then for all the big stuff out on the ranch, I have a zero turn for. But yeah, definitely, I'm a Milwaukee guy. Have been for a long time, and yeah, that's it.
All right. Awesome. Well, Randy, thank you so much for joining us. It has been a pleasure. I know you've had a busy day. You're speaking to a lot of people. I really appreciate you taking the time. And what an incredible story you have. You've been through a lot. If you ever write that book, let me know. I'll be the first one to buy a copy. Thank you all for joining us on From the Ground Up Show. If you want to be part of a future show as a guest, or if you want to call in and ask a question of one of our expert guests, let us know. You can find us online at fromthegroundupshow.com or on social media at From the Ground Up Show. And if you've benefited from the show, if you've enjoyed our time together, like, comment, share. It means a lot. That's how we get it out there. Thank you guys. And until next time, keep grinding.